Hey guys, I'm Brandon from Dynamic Response. We're going to make a real quick video, hopefully it's quick, on how to properly mount a rifle scope. A lot of people, they go to the gun shop, they pay the guy 30, 40 bucks to mount it for them, and they go home and it's not set up properly. So the right way to set up a rifle scope is to have the person whose rifle it is with you, so we can check for eye relief, we could check different positions, see how the gun is going to be set up properly, so they could shoot it effectively in hopefully every position there is. When you have a guy in a back room just installing it on the rings and snapping it on the gun, you have no idea if it's the proper eye relief for you or for that gunsmith or whatever it is. So real quick video on how to mount the scope. Everything I do that may be different from other people, but what I find works for me, that's effective, and once it's done, you never have to touch it again, hopefully. Okay, so this is the scope we're going to be mounting today. It's a VortexStrikeEagle 3 to 18 by 44. It's going to go on a DPMS AR-10, and we're using a Warne Tactical, their quick release one-piece mount. This is a pretty nice scope for the money, and this magnification range is pretty ideal for most applications, especially for a 308 AR-10 kind of setups. Having a 3 power low end and 18 on the high end, you could shoot close and you could shoot way past a mile if you needed to. So this is a good magnification range for an AR-10 if you're looking for a scope. This one is quick release, so it doesn't have the half-inch bolt on there. If your mount did have a half-inch bolt, you're going to need a torque wrench like this. Okay, these are about $100. I'm sure you can find a buddy that has one and borrow it from him. But you want everything torqued properly. You want the mount torqued. You want this rings torqued properly so it doesn't come apart and everything is uniformed and correct. Okay, so we're gonna move on now to mounting the actual scope on the gun. I'll show you everything I do. Quick, the tools that you're gonna need is some alcohol wipes. We're gonna clean down the scope with that. We're gonna clean out the rings. Anywhere where the scope touches the rings, we want to degrease it and get it all spotless. Okay. We're going to need a level like this. This is Wheeler. They come in a set of 2. The other one it comes with is for like bolt action rifles, where you can put the level and the raceway of the bolt. What you're going to need is the Allen keys that come with it. This usually comes with your scope. You may have other Allen keys that come with the scope mount itself. What I like to do is I take the foam that comes with the scope when I'm done mounting all this stuff, and I just poke these through so they're always in there. They're not sliding around anywhere. I throw this in my range bag. You don't necessarily need a torque wrench, but for the best results, you're going to want a torque wrench. This is the one I use. It's made by Warne Tactical. It's 25-inch pounds, and it's a T15, which is pretty much every ring I've ever seen. The screws for the rings are all the T15. Okay. If you had a mount that is not quick release, it's going to have a half-inch bolt. Then, like I said, you're going to want one of these or something similar. There's a couple other torque wrenches out there that work great that are adjustable. This one is not adjustable. It's set to the exact settings. I think this one's 65-inch pounds. Some bases say 65 or 68. Either one is fine. It's plenty of torque to keep it on. The whole thing we're going for here is consistency torque for the rings, the mount, everything. And it's not just half-assed or there's too much torque on one end of the scope, not enough on the other end of the scope. We just want everything as consistent as possible. So all we're going to do now is I already cleaned the base, and I cleaned the top of the rings just to save some time. Simply take your alcohol wipe and just clean this whole area here on the scope tube. Get all around, get all the grease, fingerprints off there. Now another step that I don't do, that you may have to do especially if you're buying really cheap rings, is what we call lapping the rings. So what that is you more or less put the rings together and you buy the special lap bar that's precision machined, and you put a lapping compound on there. It's kind of like a more or less sandpaper, but in a paste. and you're rubbing it back and forth, and it's going to sand out the inside of the rings to make them concentric with each other, so the rings have 100% lockup on the tube itself. If you're buying good quality scope rings like Warne Tactical, Night Force, Badger, American Defense, they're really, really good that you don't have to lap them anymore. And the machining these days is far better than when it was 10 years ago even. So you should be pretty good, but the whole goal is to have 100% lockup on the rings on the scope tube itself, so there's no fluctuation, there's no movement, there's nothing, okay? So like I said, just get this cleaned up a few times. Let that air dry. Then it's going to take my little bubble level. Now these are very, very sensitive. Okay, if you're off even a degree, it's going to show the bubble completely to the other side. So we want to find a flat spot on the rifle. I just typically go on the top rail here, and you can clean these off too. I cleaned underneath the mount itself too, just to make sure there's no oil or grease anywhere. Okay, so you're going to put your level. Okay, just like so. Now, I like to use a bipod up front, and I torque it down, tighten it up so it doesn't wobble, and then a rear bag on the buttstock or somewhere in the rear of the gun just to hold everything steady. Okay, I'm going to make sure that this is centered. Now, the one thing with a level, too, you got to make sure the level is straight. Okay, if it's off a little bit like this, it's going to take a different measurement. Okay, so you want to make sure it's completely straight. And all we need to do is level the gun left and right. We don't care about front and back. Okay, so it doesn't matter that the buttstock is lower than the front. We just need our left and right so the reticle could be perfect. These little scope, these little levels cost about $20. If you don't have these, you can use like an iPhone now. They have the apps on there for the bubble levels. Those work pretty good too. But something like this is, they last a lifetime, and it's worth the money, especially if you're going to be mounting a bunch of scopes. So then I'm just going to simply set this in here. I'm going to pretty much center the rings on the scope tube. So I got a lot of movement front and back still, okay? And if you see where I mounted the base, on this particular rifle, the guy doesn't have a rear sight, but I left enough room here for him to mount a rear backup sight if he needed to. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in there about halfway or so, give or take. And then I'm going to put my caps on. Now I'm just going to tighten these up real quick. I'm not going to snug them down though. I'm just going to get them somewhat snug so I could take a look at the reticle. I could lift the rifle up, see what kind of scope relief I need. Okay, or eye relief I should say. Now, with these small machine screws, it's a little trick that I do to get them started. Everyone knows righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. But with these little machine screws, they're such fine threads that you could cross-thread them. So what I do is I just apply a little downward pressure and turn it to the left as like I'm loosening it. And you're going to feel it want to seat. Okay, if it's directly over, let's see. There it goes. You can feel it. You can feel it seat. Now you know you're perfectly aligned with those threads, and you're not going to cross-thread them. Okay? So try it again here. Push down. Go left. There we go. Screw them down. Just going to keep doing this all around. Now you notice I didn't level out the reticle yet. The first thing I want to find is my eye relief, okay? And I could do that with the scope not being level yet. It's not a big deal. So basically all I'm going to do, once these are kind of snug up, I'm going to get behind the rifle. Think about all the different positions you shoot in and try to test it out. That's the most important thing behind mounting this yourself. or having the gunsmith, mount it for you while you're there, is that you could test all these different positions, and you can make sure you got proper eye relief regardless of what position you get in. So I like to do the bench rest position. I like to do laying prone. I take the rifle and I look like I'm shooting uphill and downhill and see if that affects it. I do this on the lowest magnification setting and the highest, because the eye relief does change from low to high. So you just want to make sure that regardless of what you do, what position you get in, you're going to have good eye relief. And you'll notice once you get it kind of set on the eye relief, things start looking pretty good. You want to move your head back and forth a little bit and see how much movement you have. So I don't want to be on the rat's ass edge of the eye relief. I want to give myself a little room for error in case I mount this, rifle different, and my cheek weld is slightly different. Maybe I got different earmuffs on or hat on, or maybe I can't get into a real good firing position. You're a competition shooter going behind a barricade, and you're not going to have that awesome cheek weld and perfect alignment. You want to kind of set yourself up for success and make sure you still got some room for error in there. Okay, so that's snug enough. Now I'm just going to set the stock to the position that I normally shoot in, and that may change. I know some guys will shorten up the stock when they're shooting standing in a lot of other positions, and then when they shoot prone, they like to have the stock a little bit further out. So if you're one of those guys, you might have to think about that even further and test both ways. Okay. Most of the time on most rifles I shoot, I'm about that far out on the scope, the buttstock, probably about like 2 clicks or so. Okay, so I'm just going to pick this up now, and I'm going to test different positions and see how it feels for me. Okay. Okay, so now that I got the scope somewhat set up, like I said, it's not leveled yet. We just got it kind of snug in here so I could check the eye relief. So I'm going to have it on 3 power, or the lowest setting first. And I just want to mount the gun up. I'm just going to throw it up and see if I get a good, clean sight picture. So I get the whole reticle, the whole image is perfectly clear. It's not blacked out. Okay, so. Yep, that was really good. If I have to come up and then move my head, then that's not good, because you want to be able to throw your rifle up and take that quick shot if you have to. Now I'm going to try it on full power. Full power is where the eye relief starts getting shorter. So you might have some more issues. So we want to just test it on every setting we can. So I'm just going to throw it up. Yep, full sight picture. Everything looks good. Okay, so now that that's set, I'm going to try shooting, pretend like I'm shooting uphill and I'm shooting downhill. Okay, because that's different positioning mechanically. So that could move your head on the gun a little bit. So we're going to go uphill, downhill, and I had a real clean sight picture the whole entire time. Now I'm going to go on the table here, and I'm going to simulate a bench rest position and see how that works for me. And then we already did prone position, and once we figure out that this is set, then I'm going to go ahead and make sure I level the reticle and torque everything down. All right, now I'm going to be doing the bench rest position. I'm going to have the scope on the lowest setting. In this case, it's 3. And I'm just going to pretend like I'm behind here shooting from a bench. Okay. So that was pretty good. Now that I'm down here, I'm going to move my head back and forth a little bit and just see how much movement I have forward and backward to where the image starts blacking out. Okay, so that's blacked out. That's perfect. Still good. Still good. That's starting to black out. That's a lot of eye relief on the lowest setting. Now we're going to throw it all the way up to 18, the highest setting, and try the same thing. Okay. So that looks pretty good. I got some leeway going left or going front and back for the eye relief. So I feel pretty confident with that. We're going to torque this up. And if we have to, like when we go to the range and test it out, and if things start changing, you know, because once you start laying prone outside on uneven terrain and stuff, you know, you may find some issues. You may want to move your stock in a little bit. Whatever it is, we could always move the whole mount forward and rearward at that point, okay, if we need to. But this seems to be pretty good where it's mounted in the rings. So now we're going to make sure we level out the rings, level out the reticle, and go ahead and torque it all down. All right, so now that we got this leveled back out, what I did was I took the scope off and I leveled the rifle, okay? Because you could see this, it's hard to get a level here and you can't fit one under here, okay? So if you have a setup like that, you're going to find yourself in the same situation. If you had a complete upper that was flat and didn't have like a rounded handguard like this, it'd be a different story. So basically what I did was I made sure the rifle was level back here, and then I took measurements to see if it's level up here, and it's not. Okay, so the gas block is off probably by about maybe 1 degree, if that. It's not much, but it's a reference point. So I know that when the gun is level, up here on the level is off by, you know, it's just, if you could see that on the camera, I'm not sure. It's just the tip of the bubble. So I could use that as a real good reference point and make sure that that's always the same. Because I'm going to have to move this bubble level to the top of the scope, level it, and keep checking to see what's going on. If you had multiple levels, that'd be great. You can just eyeball it real quick and you're good. But a lot of people ain't going to go out and buy $40, you know, in levels or to do this. So it is what it is. So I'm just going to loosen these up just enough to rotate the scope. I do not want to change the eye relief, so I do not want it to go back and front and to rear. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this, and usually the top of the turrets are pretty level. All right, if you have a good quality scope, these are going to be machined really level. If you're finding yours isn't, or it's warped or whatever, you could take off the cap and check underneath and see if that's level. Oh, that's magnetic too in this one. So that's actually pretty close already. This level is so precise and so sensitive. The smallest turn of the scope make it go on, you know, off level or. Okay, that's perfect right there. Now remember, when you do this, you want this to be as close as possible, left to right. You don't want it to be angled, okay, because it could throw off the measurement, especially with these real sensitive bubble levels. Okay, I'm going to call that good. Oops, I just moved it. See, this one is a steel cap, so it's magnetic. Okay, so I'm going to actually snug that up a little bit. And then take another reading up here to make sure I didn't move the gun or nothing changed. And then take another reading and see what happens, okay? You know, a little bit off. I mean, 1 degree, you're probably not going to notice. It ain't going to be a huge deal. But if you could take your time, do it right, try to get all the error out of there, it's just going to help you in the end, especially if you're doing long-range shooting. You know, if you're shooting 1,000 yards, a mile, whatever it is. You want everything to be perfect if you can. You don't want your equipment or your gear messing with you and fighting you. So you see how I'm tightening these, going from one to the other? The reason I'm doing that is, if you can see this on camera, there's a gap right here between the rings. Okay, see how this one's real thick and this one's tight? I want that gap to be equal from the front to the back and from left to right. Okay, so right now this one's too tight here because the other side has a huge gap now. So I'd have to adjust that and tighten this side down first a little bit, then this one a little bit. You want to split that gap evenly, okay, on both sides. But for right now, I'm just snugging it up just to see, just to confirm my zero, or my level, I should say. Okay, so it's good. So now that it's good, I'm not going to touch anything, and I'm just going to simply tighten these down and try to split that gap as best as I can. So in the rear here, I'm going to actually have to loosen this side and then tighten this side down. Don't take much. You just want to split that gap as best as you can so there's consistent pressure pushing straight down on the scope versus it teetering. This thing you just want to take your time on. Just keep checking it, looking, going to the other side, little by little. Okay, so let me check this myself. Okay, so my gap here is the same as this side now. And I still got to tighten this up. When I torque it down, it's still going to go more, but I'm going to torque it from this side, you know, like an X pattern. Okay, so now I'm going to mess with my front. Sometimes you got to loosen these up to get this side tight and then go to, well, not tight, but to level it out. The more meticulous you can be when you're doing this, the less issues you're going to have in the field. If you get this right now, get it done, get everything torqued perfectly, you're never going to have to touch this again. So you see how the gaps all look pretty good? This looks pretty close to that one. Let me come around and see for myself. Yep, they look perfect. So now the other side looks the exact same. So I'm just going to tighten these up little by little. Now if you didn't have one of these torque wrenches, okay, you can take the Allen key. Okay, now the rule of thumb to these Allen keys is you want to tighten it, holding the small side by hand, okay? And once you can't tighten it no more, then you want to flip it around and grab the long side, put this in, and do 1/4 of a turn, okay? And that's kind of the rule of thumb to get the equivalent amount of torque to what 25 inch-pounds is roughly, okay? So if you do that, so like I said, just tighten this by hand. Once you can't tighten it no more, hold in this position, flip it around, do 1/4 of a turn, and that should be equivalent to about 25 inch-pounds roughly. Okay, so you don't have to necessarily go out and buy these, but this takes all the guesswork out of it. I've seen a lot of guys use this method, and their scopes came loose while they're shooting. It just, you know, so a couple extra bucks out of your pocket, get it done right the first time. You're always going to have it. Now, once this is all set, you know, you're going to go shoot it and zero it in, right? But what I do is I shoot the gun a few rounds, you know, at the same time I'm trying to, you know, level it or zero it out. But after I shoot it maybe 5 or 10 rounds, I'm going to go ahead and re-torque all of these settings, okay, all these screws here. I'm going to re-torque them. If my base had a bolt here, like the 1/2 inch bolt for this torque wrench, I'd re-torque that too. And I'm just going to double, triple check because with all the shock from the recoil, it could loosen these up. and we want to double check it all and make them seat perfectly, retorque it all, and then get your final 0. Okay, so that's about good. These are all snug pretty good. I'm just going to have to torque them. Sorry if my big head's getting in the camera. So you want to see what you're doing. You want to see both sides so you're not messing with that gap too much. My stomach's growling. Okay, so those are pretty snug now. Now I'm just going to simply torque them. And this is, you're going to see how this wrench works. Once you get the proper torque, it's going to snap more or less. Ooh. There's a lot more than I thought. There we go. Final look at those gaps. They look pretty good to me. Okay, now a torque. Okay, see how that snapped? And there's nothing wrong with going over the same one a few times. So I like to do the X pattern. So this one to this one. Like I said, the more meticulous you can be here and get all this stuff proper, the better it's going to be later. Okay, so now I torqued them all once. I can go back and retorque these. And it pretty much ain't going to do much, but, you know, just to give it another go at it, now that they're all torqued together, they're all pushing down together, you might get a little bit extra out of them. Okay, so that's it. That's how you mount the scope. Everything's perfect now. These are torqued. Like I said, this one's a quick release. So on this quick release too, it's a little bit different. You want to adjust the tension on these. So on the other side, there's just a simple hand screw more or less. And you just want to adjust it and make it all tight. So once you get about, I'd say, 20, 30 degrees or so on this angle, you start feeling the tension and then snap it in, okay? Other mounts are different. The LaRue mounts, if you use LaRue, I like to do about a 55 degree. So pretend this is a LaRue. Once I get about 55 degrees, I start feeling tension and then snap it in. That's where I find it holds the best and it's really tight. But all of them are a little bit different. They all pretty much do the same job. Okay, so that's it. That's how we mount the scope. Everything's 100% perfect. Now, if you want at this point, you can go outdoors and you could look through your scope at like a building, and see if the reticle is perfectly square with like the brick line going up a building. You can use a line. You can hang a piece of rope with a weight at the bottom and check it that way as well. But like I said, with these levels, these are so precise that all that's just going to be redundant, which is fine to do. We'll end up doing it too, but we don't have to get that all on camera. It's kind of pointless. When you go to the range, like I said, test fire the gun, shoot a few rounds off, and then retorque all these screws again, check your base again, and then finalize your 0. And you should be good to go for life. Okay, you should never have to touch this scope of the mount again if you don't want to. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Share this video with your buddies. Subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. More videos to come. We're trying to get a video out every week for you guys. about guns, training, accessories, you name it. So see you in the next one. Thank you.